Tonight's results show that Albertans have put Premier Jim Prentice on probation.
Thank you.
I know that there's a lot of speculation about whether or not I'm the right leader to lead the Wild Rose into the next election.
Welcome to Inside Alberta Politics. I'm Chris Varcoe with Calgary-Herald political reporters Darcy Henton and James Wood. We're speaking just after the by-elections in Alberta that saw the Progressive Conservatives win all 4 seats under Jim Prentice. James, you covered Prentice on Monday night. What do you think the message is that the new Premier and his party will be taking out of what happened?
And it is time to get to work.
I guess the message is that his message worked, that under new management worked. Prentice gambled a bit with the idea of having multiple by-elections instead of holding a single one to get him into the legislature, and that gamble paid off. People called it a mini election, and now I guess he's got a mini mandate.
If he had lost any of those ridings, I guess we would be asking questions about what went wrong with the Tories, but instead we're asking the question of what went wrong with the opposition.
I know that there's a lot of speculation about whether or not I'm the right leader to lead the Wild Rose into the next election.
So, Darcy, you were covering the opposition throughout much of this campaign. What do you take of what actually went wrong?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that the opposition failed to get any traction from all the gaffes of the Redford regime. They just couldn't take advantage of it, and they focused on negativity, which the PC government claims turned the voters off.
They made a little bit of headway in terms of upping their popular vote, but they didn't up it enough, obviously. James, the Liberals here in town and the NDP did not fare particularly well. We saw the NDP finish second in Edmonton-Whitemud, but they weren't in the game anywhere really in Calgary. And the Liberals finished in either third or fourth and really didn't pose a challenge. The Alberta Party, conversely, showed very well under leader Greg Kark in Calgary-Elbow. They finished second, but they didn't actually make the breakthrough they wanted, and they did fare poorly in the other 2 ridings in Calgary. What is the message here for the Liberals and the Alberta Party and also the NDP?
Well, the NDP I don't think had very high expectations for Calgary at all, so they're a bit of a non-factor here at the moment. But the experience in Calgary-Elbow, I think, is going to raise some questions about whether the Alberta Party and the Liberals can continue working at cross purposes with each other when they are kind of trying to capture the same territory politically. And I think it's also going to raise questions about Raj Sherman's leadership of the Liberals, because they don't seem to be making progress right now. For the last little while, they haven't been able to raise money, and now they don't seem to be getting votes.
I wonder if the unification issue is going to come up again. We saw the Liberals debated this briefly last year and they turned it down, but now if you looked in Calgary-Elbow and you combine the votes of the Liberals and the Alberta Party candidates, and I know that's a big if, I talk about them unifying, but if that had happened, they would have won. So I wonder whether that will ever gain traction here with these 3 parties.
The NDP under new leader Rachel Notley doesn't have any interest in a merger, and I think they're going to really focus on trying to win seats in Edmonton and build out from there. I think it does raise the question for the Alberta Party and the Liberals, maybe not so much merger, but do they need to be thinking about a new political entity that combines the strengths that they do have? Because they don't seem to be moving forward in a way that's going to be translated into actual seats in the legislature at this point.
Darcy, I guess the bigger issue then right now, and we saw the bigger news on Tuesday, was what's going on with the Wild Rose. They had high hopes, obviously, going into this campaign. They got shut out. And now we have Danielle Smith announcing in a surprise move that she's going to ask for a review of her leadership at the annual meeting in November. What do you make of this tactic? Is it a smart move, and why do you think she's doing it?
Well, the leader announced today, Tuesday, that she made this decision after considerable soul searching and talking with the party president and some of her advisors. But I don't think her leadership is really the question here. She did score about 90% the last time there was a leadership review. And I think her main goal here will be to try to unite the party behind her going into the 2016 vote.
James, one of the things that Danielle Smith said on Monday night when she announced that she was disappointed with the loss, but they were going to persevere and move forward, is that Jim Prentice is under probation. But do you think that that's true? Is that bravado, or is this just the Wild Rose trying to, put the best spin on things?
Well, it seems at this point, with Smith's call for a leadership review, that she's under more probation than Jim Prentice at this point. I think the Wild Rose's problem in this by-election campaign was that they had been building up expectations going into it. There was a lot of talk about there are no safe Tory seats, the Tories are done. I think that was a verbatim quote from Danielle Smith, and I think at some point in the campaign they realized we may not win and we better start downplaying expectations, and I'm not sure that actually worked.
Normally at this time of the show we talk about our winners and losers in Alberta politics, but I think the ballot box has pretty much spoken about that. But let's talk about the loss in Alberta politics of a huge figure, and that is Rod Love. Rod, of course, was the chief of staff for former Premier Ralph Klein for years, both in the city of Calgary and then being in the Premier. He died this week after a battle with cancer. I know, Darcy, you covered him for many years. What's going to be your lasting memory of Rod Love?
Well, no one can forget his acerbic wit, his dry humor, and his very cruel demeanor sometimes to reporters. He really was the gatekeeper for Premier Klein, but he was a brilliant strategist. I would never tell him this to his face. I hope you're listening now. But it was some of Klein's greatest conquests probably happened in the cabinet room or in the caucus room. And I think Rod's strategy of keeping the left-leaning and the right fiscal hawks in caucus on the same path, I think that was Rod Love's work. And he did it quietly, and he did it tremendously well.
And he answered the phone. And I said, I'd like to come and help your campaign. He says, well, come on down. I'm across from the St. Louis Hotel. Well, I'm an upper middle class kid. I have no idea where the St. Louis Hotel is.
And you also had some personal interaction with Rod. Tell us about that.
Well, I used to have, there were occasions when I had a few beers with Rod, and he would tell me a little bit about what was really going on behind those doors in the Premier's office. And many of the things that they did entirely to win favor, curry favor with the public, to look like they were actually doing something. But he had that great sense of humor, and he knew how to twist the knife when he needed to.
And he knew how to keep reporters in line too, I understand.
Yeah, well, one time he tried to cut me off from access to the Premier, and I reminded him that before you cut off my access, you have to give me access.
All right, thanks.